In this video, we're going to continue our work with equations, but we're going to take a look at a few different types of equations, ones that may be slightly more complicated than what we had looked at previously. The key with these problems is figuring out what you're going to do first, because you want to make sure that you follow your steps in the right order. Sometimes you will have a choice as to which way you do the steps, but for now, if we do them in the wrong order, we're going to end up making a mistake that can change our answer, so we want to make sure that we always know where we're supposed to start. I'm going to start by figuring out where my variable is. So here it's in the numerator of this fraction. Here my variable is being divided by 6. And here my variable is being multiplied by 2/3. In the second and third examples, my variable is on what we're going to call the ground level. It's in the same line as the rest of the problem. But in the first example, my variable is trapped up on the second floor here. So in order to undo that, the very first thing we need to do here is multiply both sides of the problem by 3. This will bring our variable down off that top floor by undoing the division by 3 and bringing it down to a point where we can work with it. Now we would just subtract 5 from both sides and we get our answer of 1. In the other two, our variable is not trapped upstairs. We just have it in the same level here, so we're going to follow these steps same as we did before. So here I start outside my circle, I see plus 8. The opposite of plus is minus. We're going to do subtraction here. And then my variable group comes down, and we have x divided by 6 equals 2. The opposite of division, like we saw over here, is multiplication. So we're going to multiply both sides by 6. This gives me the same thing as x over 1, or 1x, which is what we want. And we get 12 on the other side. For this last one, we're going to do the same idea. So we add 5 to both sides to undo that subtraction. And now we have 2/3 x equals 12. Usually when I see a problem like this, I'm going to make it a little easier on myself. Not that color. And I'm going to bring my variable into the numerator. So I'm going to rewrite this as 2x over 3 equals 12. Now this looks very similar to this one and to this one. I'm going to undo division by 3 by multiplying by 3 on both sides. And we have 2x equals 36. And now the last thing is to undo that multiplication by 2. So I divide both sides by 2 and I get x equals 18. There is another way that you can solve this one. Instead of moving x into the numerator, if we're here, we can use what we call the multiplicative inverse property. And we're going to multiply by the reciprocal of this fraction 2/3, which is 3 over 2. For those of you that are familiar with cross-reducing fractions, the 2's cancel out to a 1, the 3's cancel out to a 1, and we're just left with x. Here, this is the same thing as 12 over 1 times 3 over 2, and we're left with 36 over 2, which reduces to 18. You can use either method. Some people find one easier than the other, but it's up to you. Again, remember that whatever we do on one side, we must do to the other. It's all about that idea of balance. Alright, so go ahead and pause the video and see if you can solve our first example here. Alright, for this one, our variable is trapped up on the second floor, so we have to undo that division by 2 as the very first step. Then, once we get rid of that, we have x plus 3 equals 10. We see addition, so we undo that with subtraction, and we get 7. Go ahead and pause the video and try our second example. Alright. For this one, our variable is not trapped up on a floor, it's in the same level as everything else, so we're going to undo the constant first. We subtract 6 from both sides to undo the addition. We end up with x divided by 4 equals 3. In order to undo division, we're going to multiply both sides by 4, and we get x equals 12. For this one, we do the same thing as we did before. We start by getting rid of the constant. We add 5 to both sides, and we have 2/3 x, 2/3 times x, equals 12. Now, remember there's two ways that we can do this one. We can bring the variable up into the numerator. We would multiply both sides by 3. We have 2x equals 36. We can divide both sides by 2. And we get x equals 18. The other option is that we multiply by the reciprocal here. So if we have 2/3 x equals 12, we can multiply both sides by the reciprocal, or the reverse of that fraction, 3/2. That reduces to a 1. We have 12 over 1 times 3, which is 36, divided by 2, which is 18. Either method works. You can use whichever you prefer. Keeping that in mind, go ahead and pause the video and try the last question here. Alright, so we can either move our variable into the numerator. We have 3x over 4 equals 6. Now we're going to multiply both sides by 4 to undo that division. 4 times 1 over 4 is 1, so we just have 3x now. And on the right side, we have 24. Then we divide both sides by 3, and we get 8 for x. The other way that we can do this is by multiplying by our reciprocal. So we would multiply by 4 over 3 to undo the 3 over 4. And that multiplicative inverse property says that our product here should be 1. So we're just left with x. 6 over 1 times 4 over 3 becomes 24 over 3, which reduces to 8. This also works with decimals. Go ahead and pause the video and try and solve each equation. Alright, here, our variable is trapped up in that second floor. We have all this division by 7 going on, keeping everything up top. So we undo that by multiplying both sides by 7. And when we do that, that undoes the division. So we're just left with d minus 3.4 on the left and 19.6 on the right. 3.4 is being subtracted from our variable, so we undo that subtraction with addition, and we end up with d equals 23. On the right-hand side, we start by circling our variable group. We see that we're adding 4.5, so we undo that by subtracting 4.5. Remember, we always do the opposite. Then we're left with 3 times x equals 15. The opposite of multiplication is division, so we divide both sides by 3, and we're left with x equals 5. Remember, the key is to know what you need to do first in order to solve the equation. Take a minute, and in your packet, circle which step you should do first for each of these 4 equations. Alright, in our first example, that division by 4 kind of takes over everything. Our variable is trapped up on the second floor, so we got to bring it down by multiplying both sides by 4. In the second example, we have our variable group on level with everything else, so we need to get rid of this negative 6. We want to make that 0 to make it go away, so we undo negative 6 with positive 6 on both sides. For the next one, we can bring our x up into the numerator, pretending it's x over 1 and multiplying, and then we would start by undoing the multiplication or the division by 7 with multiplication. Another option, if you want to use that multiplicative inverse, would be our option E here, to multiply by 7 over 3. For the last one, we have our variable and its coefficient, so we start away from that, and we want to undo addition, which means we're going to subtract 7.